today I'll be speaking through the strongest possible policy interventions to protect our energy grid, everyday ratepayers, and our climate futures. I'll start with local interventions, then I'll move to state and federal. But because of how energy markets are structured and regulated, there is significant overlap across these areas. So this invites the opportunity for us to think non-traditionally and expansively about our borders and how we can best push back to protect our natural resources. Next slide. Great. So first, local communities can leverage the approval or zoning process to stop a data center or regulate its energy use. Local communities can do this by building in binding energy requirements into the approval and zoning process. So first, local governments can require data center developers to receive a commitment letter from the energy utility company saying that the utility company has enough capacity to serve that customer. Communities can then go a few steps further. They can require that data centers make their electricity use public in monthly reporting and hold data centers liable for variances in energy thresholds they estimated in their application. So they are not using more electricity than expected without consequence. And if at any time use is exceeding locally determined thresholds or the utility's stated capacity, a local government can revoke the conditional use permit. Next slide. Local communities can also regulate data center energy use. So first, they can mandate in the application process that data centers use 24/7, zero emissions, additional renewable energy to power the data center. Additional is a super important requirement to ensure that data centers do not take energy away from another project that would have used the available renewable energy to decarbonize. Communities can also prohibit off-grid and behind-the-meter power generation. This is also known as bring your own power solutions. These proposals often mean expanded gas generation or nuclear power, and they allow data centers to sidestep investments in the shared energy infrastructure that benefit them. If communities do allow data centers to bring their own power, they must heavily scrutinize these commitments and require that the power is additional and renewable. These commitments often fail to sufficiently materialize in time or at all. And so local communities also make sure that the data centers appropriately pay for any electricity grid services that it's actually receiving. Local communities can also prohibit data centers from using backup diesel generators, which degrade our air quality and worsen our community health. If backup generators are deemed necessary, communities can pass ordinances regulating their use, including 1, requiring a permit, 2, requiring proper notification to all community members, 3, mandating pollution control equipment be installed, and 4, conducting cumulative impact reporting before approvals. Finally, we know that some state and local governments exempt data centers from paying sales tax on their electricity use. If a local government is not preempted from doing so, they can tax data centers' electricity use and increase the rate during energy emergencies like heat waves. Then a portion of this tax can be funneled into local community projects or energy infrastructure. Next slide, please. So this next set of recommendations I'm going to speak about are targeted to the state level, and I'll start with ratepayer protections. Regulators must ensure that the costs of building energy infrastructure to serve data centers are not unfairly passed on to ordinary customers, including households and small businesses. This means ensuring that 100% of costs associated with the development of data centers, including construction and power generation, are paid by the data centers, not taxpayers, at a rate that is proportional and just. So we can do this through tariff schedules, meaning the pricing structure set by utility companies and regulators. Large load electricity customers, like data centers, must be subject to a tariff schedule that's equal or proportional to the costs of serving them. So this might require instituting a new schedule or amending an existing one and assigning all proper fees. Oregon recently passed a law instituting a revised tariff schedule for large industrial users like data centers. Transparency is a super important piece of the puzzle for protecting ratepayers because if deals are negotiated in secret, then the public does not have an opportunity to intervene. So states can require that electricity use is subject to public disclosure laws and prohibit the use of secrecy contracts like non-disclosure agreements in all data center development deals. Next slide. So Public utility commissions can also protect against the risk that data center developers pull out of their deals early or use less demands than expected, which would leave communities to shoulder the costs of the build out. So this can be achieved through contract terms like minimum contract lengths, upfront payments, and even security deposits. Public utility commissions can also set early termination fees and penalties if a data center decides to shut down early. For example, a settlement with AEP Ohio Utility Company requires a data center to pay minimum charges for 3 years after notice of termination. Next slide. Now, the staggering power demand projections driven by data center development threaten to destabilize our already fragile energy grids and prolong our dependence on the fossil fuel industry. So first, states and regulators can pass laws and regulations designed to protect our grid stability. These include minimum monthly payments no matter what the actual usage is, the right to curb electricity use in emergencies, or placing caps on total electricity use for data centers. In Maine, for example, in-state electricity sales to data centers are capped at 25% of all sales. And additionally, states can implement policies that promote additional renewable infrastructure and energy use while opposing the development of fossil fuel-based generation. Now, importantly, when it comes to renewable energy infrastructure, the goal is not to advance this technology for data centers at the expense of other needs. Next slide. So at the federal level, I want to talk about FERC, which stands for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which is the federal agency responsible for regulating the interstate transmission of energy. FERC's role in regulating data centers is a very live issue. In fact, we're expecting a proposal to be published in June of 2026 that will outline FERC's federal authority on data centers. So I'll call out just a few of the strongest policy demands FERC could implement. Similar to our recommendation at a state level, FERC can ensure that data centers pay for 100% of the infrastructure costs and upgrades needed to service them. FERC can reject policies that enable AI data centers to soak up all of the available energy, and they can compel the collection and publication of data centers' energy use across the entire country. So many of us on this call are likely tracking the FERC proposal, so there'll be a lot more to discuss soon. So next and last slide. So I want to end by reviewing some of the ways we can reassert democratic control over the energy sector, which has faced decades of consolidation, vertical integration, and private takeover. So these interventions span the local, state, and federal level. So I think a third of us are working on this, which is amazing to see. So throughout the US, New York and Tucson, Milwaukee, bold public power campaigns are demanding shifts from investor-owned utilities to democratically controlled power systems. This is a strong way to protect against rapidly rising electricity prices because investor-owned utility rates have increased 49% more than inflation, whereas the rates from publicly owned utilities have remained 44% less than inflation. We also can deploy an anti-monopoly toolkit to tackle concentrated power across the energy stack. This is a very live issue with NextEra set to acquire Dominion Energy, a merger that would create the US's largest utility company. And finally, the federal government can mobilize its authority to prevent the private equity takeover of investor-owned utility companies like we're seeing with BlackRock in New Mexico and Minnesota. Thank you so much.